Hi, I'm Kim Polishuk.
And I'm Jen Giffen from
Shooks and Giff, the podcast. A part of the Education Podcast Network.
Just like the show you're listening to right now.
Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others.
Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the High Tech Podcast with Josh and
Will.
We're getting so
We did a thing.
We're so close at nailing that. We did a thing. We've tried it before, you know, but I feel like we have this weird delay when we do it. You know, I'm waiting for the day that we don't even like have a delay and it sounds like we're those characters from Frozen. Wait, no, they don't actually complete each other's.
Sandwiches?
Nailed it.
Oh,
Look at that.
boom,
Oh,
baby.
we didn't even try that one. That was look at us.
You can tell that Josh and I are firing on all cylinders this week.
Oh yeah, we are. You guys should be ready for a crazy episode. It's about to get insane. Anyway, welcome to another week, guys. The High Tech Podcast, and ladies, and all people, and animals. I don't know. I felt like I had to include.
Keep trying on that one.
Well, I'll try some things and Wookiees, whatever. Anyway, whatever floats your boat. Welcome to the High Tech Podcast. Oh, that was solid. That was good. It was good. Anyway, another week. Before we jump in, our normal spiel, we're online. If you don't know that we're online and you're just listening to us for the first time, or you've been listening to us for a while through your podcast tool, whatever that may be, an app, Google, Apple, the other random ones that are named.
Spotify.
Anchor, Spotify. It's funny because I listen to things through Spotify, not a sponsor, but and I forgot about them. Anyway, if you listen to us but you haven't checked us out on social media or reached out to us or connected with us, you should do that. So you can find us on Twitter. We're there at High Tech Podcast. You can check us out there. You can also email us if you're older than a certain age and still use email to communicate with people. My wife was busting on me.
Wow.
That she's like, Josh, people don't use email. And I was like, first of all, that's not true.
I use it every day.
I use it every day at work. But second of all, whoa, attacked. Anyway, you can email us in inbox at hightechpod.us.
.us.
And send us... nope, wrong. It's .us. For those of you who are new, this is becoming a debate. And also, like many of our episodes lately, you can email us a picture, if you're listening to this episode, of... I didn't think about this carefully.
Oh, gosh.
Of a puma. Is a puma a real animal?
Yes.
Or just a shoe?
Yes. It's
Okay.
a real Oh, wow. And there's the misfire. One of those cylinders not quite working.
Yeah, it's, it's quality content. Email us a picture of a puma or send it to us on Twitter if you don't use email. You're like my wife. I know you're listening. Anyway, and also check us out at hightechpod.us.
.us.
That's our website. It has a lot of great resources. Each episode has a wonderful resource page that you can check out that has some information about the tools that we recommend.
Made by his
and fun
truly.
things like that.
Josh makes all the web pages.
Yeah.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah. Well, I make the web pages and you actually make us sound not like crap. So
one
we
tries.
each have our roles.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, this week though, we've got a great episode planned for you. So if you were listening to us in season 2, we talked about a tool. Sorry, Will was dancing and it didn't go well.
Threw me right
we
under
talked
that
about
bus.
a tool called iorad in one of our previous episodes.
Yes.
It has since become a favorite of both of ours. Will's actually going to be getting to use it at a professional level now.
Whoop, whoop. Looking forward to it.
I'm just going to look from the outside using the free version for a while.
With jealousy
but
and envy.
Yeah, with a lot of jealousy. But iORAD's a great tool. We really loved it. The ironic part about it is when we first did our episode, we'd only really looked at it a couple times, and kind of like we're learning it while we were talking about it, and have since become avid fans of this tool, and think
Does
it is
it
very
make
awesome.
us Ioradians? Are we Ioradicals? Like I don't know.
I'm sure I buy into the fun little like group team names that tools come up with yet.
Nah.
I didn't say
like
that.
People who listen to
in this
us are
episode.
clearly high-techians, or
Clearly, I don't know why you wouldn't call
Right.
yourself that after you listen
Right.
to our podcast for a while.
You know.
Like, why wouldn't you want to identify as that nickname? Okay, we digress. This episode, we've an exciting new guest on. Sean Adams, head of sales for iorad. Will was able to connect with Sean actually through work contacts, and Sean actually agreed to come on to the podcast after he had heard that we did an episode on iorad. And this is a great episode, kind of a different episode, but Sean gives a lot of context to the background behind iorad in this episode, which I'm really excited about. And we learned a lot of cool things about how iorad came to be, and just even the uses and what really motivated Sean to join the team at iorad as someone who was not there from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool to see through his eyes what won him over. And I think for those of you listening, if you haven't looked at iorad yet, will win you over. So really excited for this episode. I'm not going to say anything more. Let's just jump in and talk to Sean.
This is a fantastic week where we not only get to hear from someone who sounds better than us and looks even better than us. You won't get to see that, folks. Or sorry.
It's not like it's a hard bar to pass.
But we're digging into a conversation with iorad. We have the head of sales, Sean Adams, with us. Sean, are you there?
I'm here.
And
Will,
did I
Josh,
get that?
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Did I get that right? Did I miss anything? Sean Adams, head of sales.
You got it. Yeah, it's a nice, easy name.
I like that. You know, the head of is very clear. Director and senior manager and all those things get goofy sometimes, but you're the head.
We like simplicity over here.
Oh, well, we know. Oh my gosh. So Josh and I are going to fangirl all night. Forgive us. We love iorad. I don't think you're going to complain about that, but I've been using it a lot. I know that Josh has tried to start using it. Are you using it already, Josh?
I keep peppering it in. I haven't made the sale call yet because we haven't got it, but I will say the extension is up on my Chrome browser right now above us as we're doing this. So
now, Sean, whereabouts are you joining us from? You East Coast? What you in Tokyo? Who knows these days, right?
Yes, I am East Coast. I'm in southern New Jersey. I'm about 10 miles outside of Philadelphia, so very southern part of New Jersey.
Where you got to get your water ice and a cheesesteak, right?
It's taken me a long time to undo a lot of those Jersey accents, and I'm speaking to people across the world, and it takes me a while to slow down and actually pronounce all the letters in each word.
That's a bigger thing than you know. My sister-in-law moved out of state at some point. We're both from Pennsylvania, Josh and I, but my sister-in-law moved out of state at one point, and she was working for a national company, and she would get people to tell her, like, ma'am, could you slow down, please? Mm-hmm. Like, she just spoke that much faster than folks in the South and things like that. So that's outstanding.
It's actually a really helpful sales skill to be able to speak to people where English is their second language. It forces you to really contextualize, slow down, leave out big acronyms and buzzwords, and just speak very clearly. It's actually been really helpful for me.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
I mean,
awesome.
I love that kind of stuff, even just working with an international company. You know, it's tough when you've got colleagues in Belgium and different things where you don't know if the euphemisms or colloquialisms or acronyms. We all have acronyms. Business is nuts with those, but it's definitely a fun thing. Now, Sean, how about long have you been with iorad? Are you newer to the company? Is the company younger? How's that work out?
So the company is not new. It's been around since 2007, actually the inception of the idea. I am relatively new with the company, so I've been here just under a year. And we've been basically a freemium-based product, meaning that it's designed to be very self-serving, user-friendly, no real onboarding and training. You guys can attest to, it's designed to be wildly simple and really kind of one path through, and you really get the hang of it. And so they haven't needed a whole lot to sell the product or get people bought in. But as we've got into the pandemic and larger companies have had to go remote, we've had a huge need to really tackle some of these larger organizations, colleges, universities worldwide. So I've stepped in to kind of build out the sales motions to help those larger entities to kind of gravitate towards taking on this tool.
That's
awesome. That's very cool. Now, I'm curious, the history behind iorad, right? So how did you guys end up getting started? Like, how did this company end up becoming the beautiful thing that I have seen now? I'm holding my bias.
From an idea to a Mercedes. Like,
to the gift that is iorad right now, in my opinion. So
yeah, it's a pretty crazy story, or just the origin, at least. So Sandeep Patel, who's the founder and CEO, very brilliant gentleman, Back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, he was an instructional designer. And so he worked primarily in the pharma industry, and he was brought in to build documentation and training content, primarily on digital platforms, CRM tools. I'm using acronyms already, but customer databases, all the tools that go into the business world and things that they need to manage. And he would sit down with the subject matter expert and he would say, okay, show me how you do every single task. And it was screenshots and really bad, video capture, documenting with text, all these things that we did before the cloud was really a thing. And, on the 1 millionth screenshot later, he was like, there's got to be a better way to string this together and maybe automate some of these processes. Even the largest entities out there were doing the exact same thing with their training. And it was wildly painful to make these things. And not only just capturing the ideas, but then editing and managing them as the technology continues to change and iterate and improve.
Mm-hmm.
And so he really spent about a decade out of pocket. It's a fully bootstrapped organization, means there's no outside funding.
Wow.
And he has just unbelievable willpower to stick with this idea. He was fascinated by getting this out there. And over that decade, he built a tool that, as you guys can attest to, when you use it, it mirrors exactly how you would do and build a tutorial start to finish. It just automates the majority of those processes, especially from the capturing side, the person making the content. And so, speed up to where we are today. Now we've got, global brands, huge universities, tens of thousands of people worldwide using the tool for those sort of purposes.
Well, that's just awesome.
That's
and I mean, Josh, you've been there, right? What Sandeep was
100%.
experiencing.
Yeah. Well, the cloud exists now, and I still get screenshots that look like they were created, a decade ago, from a computer that should not still be running. I think to your point, like what gets, obviously we're very excited about this tool. Now I will admit, I basically found it 3 days before we did our episode. It was basically Will was like, hey, have you seen this? And I opened it up.
3 hours maybe.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know. I was giving myself more credit. You know what? Shush. But I think what I'm most impressed about it is, to your point, I know the tools that can do other stuff like this, and I never use them because it takes forever to create it. And managing it is a nightmare. Like if I ever have to go back and edit something because, God forbid, one of my apps changed an icon, that whole process has been complicated. So it's really cool to kind of see that was kind of a spawning vision for what happened in it.
I remember one of the first ones I did was that issue. Like I spent hours making it, and then I got feedback on it, and I was like, I have to spend hours fixing it, and that's
I think the most difficult thing with any purchase organizationally is the change component. And most tools require you to adapt or adopt their methodology. Here's how you capture. Here's how you're now going to use video. Here's our 5-step process, what have you. And it requires that person to now change and adopt this as their new habit for doing this task. I think what most people love about iorad is it forces no change upon them. It really, as the word describes, captures what they're already doing and just automates those steps. And I think that that's one of the bigger pieces that really helps give you the sticking power, that it's not adding work to a plate, it's actually removing it. And it's mirroring what you're doing, not telling you, hey, you need to do this best practice.
That's a really good insight into even the mentality of creating it. And it's like a reflection point for me. Like, oh, when I'm using it, that's how it works.
That's true.
This is a little bonus question, an asterisk on the first one here. I didn't think about this in prep, so forgive me if there's no fun story. Oh well. Where does iorad come from? Like, what a name, iorad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's radical. We love that, but
yeah. So the funny story, when I asked this, when I was in my kind of interview to get into the company to figure out what the heck was going on, the not so fun answer is that back in 2006 and 2007, this was one of the only basically less than 6-letter words left in the domains available. So that's the first section. What happened retroactively is Sandeep and all his wisdom came up with this beautiful kind of acronym of instructional object rapid development. And so that's the sort of posthumous acronym that we've attached to this word.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, we like to play around with it, and we have our IO radicals out there, and
Yep.
we try to have some fun with the naming.
I
Yeah.
love your signature. IO radically yours. Like you nailed it.
That's
Nailed
awesome.
it.
Mhm.
Yeah, you made good use out of that name, which
Oh yeah.
is good. Yeah.
So question number 2, keeping it moving along. What makes you love this product? Like I've sat through your sales pitch, but I also have gotten to chat with you, aside from that. And I can kind of see that you're bought in. Most of our interviews to date have been like with a CEO or a founder. Like it's really easy to ask them, why do you love this? Because I made it.
Mhm.
But what's that stand out for you?
Yeah, it takes a lot to be bought in and sold by something that you don't have real financial investment in. But at this point, it's my background is really in small business. I owned multiple different small businesses for about 10 years before I got into tech sales. And I got into tech sales to help those small businesses that I saw struggling so much, myself
Sure.
being one of them. And I saw that this technology out there was just transformational for organizations. If they could just adapt a scheduling program, a customer database. I mean, it would just revolutionize a lot of the activities they were doing. And so I did a lot of consulting work, helping them implement these systems and really get guides. And I was doing everything manually. This was around that same time, probably 2010 to 15, something around that range. No idea that iorad existed at that point. And I was doing everything manually with videos and all that. And my own process was this realization of how important documented processes were and real tactical, interactive training to explain how to do something.
Mm.
Not the, kind of giant standing from the rooftops and yelling at someone to do something, not pointing at them, not a 45-minute webinar, but like real training that met people where they were. And
Sure.
I did this the only way I knew how, which was manually, a lot of the ways that people do things now. And I went through a couple of different other companies that I worked with selling software, got introduced to Sandeep and sat down. First time I heard it, I'm like, great, it's a screenshot editor. I mean, who needs another one of those, right? And then he just said in his perfect wisdom, he was like, just go download it and try it. Like,
Oh
no,
yeah.
I'm not going to try to sell you. And then I started making it, and then I was sending it over. And then I went to my mom, who is not tech literate at all. And I said, let me show you how this thing works. And she could understand it, and it made sense to her. And it was like, boom, it had that mom effect. It had this
Yep.
clarity and simplicity. And the scale of where this could go was really what excited me, because every organization out there has knowledge and they have people that need the knowledge. And the delivery of that information is usually a just painstaking process to create and manage. And so I see some of the largest organizations on the planet, and they all struggle with these same things, and they're all overcomplicating it. They're using, just 6 and 7 figure products to try to solve these issues, and it's still not really giving them what they need. So the
Right.
simplicity to me, the ability to pivot and iterate in a second, to have it all be cloud based, there's no uploading and downloading. It's just the simplicity is kind of deafening at some points. When it clicks, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been overcomplicating this for this long. And that's really what stuck for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool. Because I just to attest to that, I think that's what's so powerful. What iORAD's doing is, like you said, it's like, so I've created plenty of guides, I've created plenty of videos, I've done all this type of stuff, and at the end of the day, what people really need is something that they can do the thing while being taught how to do it, right? Because I may show them that video.
Safe practice.
If I had $1 for everybody who watched a video that I made and literally within 5 seconds forgot half of what was there they were doing, like, so just that whole process. Yeah, it seems so
and
simple, but it's such a cool idea.
Do you remember the folder of PDF tutorials that I left you when you took over?
Yeah,
the
I
job? Do you
deleted
know
it
what
when I came. Yeah,
That-
it was gone pretty quickly.
Punchline stolen. Exactly. Right. Like I used to work at Josh's current job, and I had made all of these tutorials, and some of them were 2 PDF pages, some of them were 6 and 7 and 13 pages, and I don't blame him a second of blame for deleting that folder, never using them ever. They're so dead, and they take so much effort to fix.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
There's a really great Harvard Business Review article that talks about this, the forgetting loop, they call it, the forgetting curve. And it
Mm.
talks about if knowledge is not applied within the first, I think it's 3 weeks. I might have that amount of time wrong, but 75% of it is forgotten in that first 3 weeks if there's no application of that knowledge.
Mm.
And so we find that people, schools, we have universities, we have big businesses, they spend unbelievable amounts of money, time, and energy on creating onboarding documentation, supportive documentation, everything that they would need from a help center reference point, and it just doesn't get used or it gets forgotten. And it's like, it's just such a giant waste and void that's out there because there's no application. Like most of us learn through a couple of different mediums. They may be different in that skill and how we like to consume information, but everybody likes to get the visual click by click interactive, get it and try it without a lot of risk associated to it. And I think that the try it modes and these different kind of ways in which someone can consume content is really what drives it home, because you're actually experiencing it. You're not just trying to hear someone say it and then open a different screen and hope that you got the full picture. And then 3 weeks goes by and forget it. It's just not humanly possible to recall that amount of information.
Yeah.
Well, and more so, these aren't meant to be like our breakdowns of the product, but I think it's relevant to the functionality and even that like connectivity for the user, because it's an extension, because you can make things public, you can make things private, but like because I could be on my internal, intranet page or learning management system or whatever, right, to my company, to my university, and click on my extension and see help guides that are contextually relevant. That is all the more important. Like, yeah, I can put in the body text on the page, click here for a tutorial, but I can also build a culture over time where my people would just click on the iorad icon for help on the page that they're at. And that, I mean, it fits so many like learning theories for what we try to accomplish in the education space, but also just makes it easier. It's just easier if it's that accessible for the end user.
There's a level of friction that exists with most knowledge that people are just, they choose to ignore, I'll say.
I like that. Friction.
Because what ends up happening is the way in which people receive information now, the way that the internet has gone, the Google effect, the Amazon effect, is that if you need something, you stick it in this search bar and it pops up in your face within less than a second. That's how people are used to learning things quickly and getting the information they need. And then they go into their first job or their new job, and here is 37,000 pages of information that they have to figure out how to read or listen to. And you wonder why people get frustrated. And then you have the Great Resignation, right? And all these other things that happen because it's not supportive of how people like to learn and how people interact in their daily life, right? Yeah. And so this idea of removing friction, meeting learners where they are. If I'm on a screen and I have a question, I use the analogy of a GPS, right? Anyone in the world can follow and figure out where to go to a place they have never been before because of this stupid little app that's in our phone. Yep. You just have to know the end destination, and you will literally be given step-by-step instructions for the entirety. If you're driving across the country or across the world, it doesn't matter. And that's so frictionless. It takes all of that out of the equation. You're not reading a map. You're not stopping at a red light and calling someone. It's right there, right? And that delivery is what people are used to with their learning. And so that's why we try to support that with the sort of in-app delivery of training. Because if I have a question, I want to go to my GPS. I want to go to Google, right? It's frictionless. And that's what we're trying to support.
That's so
Nailed
cool.
It.
There's a reason you're head of sales. You have me sold at this point, which didn't take much. I was already sold. So let's anyway. Now I guess I'm curious, right? So because like our background's obviously education, right? And we're talking to some of this, and I love that it's good to know this came out of an instructional designer. There's so much more starts to make sense when I realize that. But I guess the question I have for you is, what do you have any top stories from users? And specifically, I'm kind of curious because I know you're in education area. Do you have any kind of top education user stories, kind of places that this has helped in the education field?
Yeah, so a couple of themes that we saw that were really satisfying or just kind of heartwarming were when the pandemic was first coming to light, we had all these educators out there who overnight became part-time or full-time IT professionals as well, whether they liked it or not, right? They suddenly had student bodies of fifth graders or, anybody in between who needed help to do everything. The classroom became this digital little box that they had to live in. And they had to help them understand the environment they were in before they could even teach them anything. And so we had all these stories of teachers that were adapting and adopting this tool and saying, now I don't have to spend 40 minutes of my 45-minute class explaining to people how to log into Google Classroom and what button to click to get started. Right. And there was this huge drop off that would happen when they were adopting this tool. Like, okay, great. Now I've got to get these kids to understand how this works, or we have a new mechanism to deliver the knowledge or the lesson, the curriculum, whatever it happened to be. And it was a complete distraction because people didn't understand the tool. And so we heard all these stories from teachers and educators out there who really were just being able to get back to what they wanted to do and give them like just a minuscule amount of joy in their life, because life was so hard while they were having to live remotely and take care of their own families and everyone else's children, or, whatever the classroom environment looked like. And so hearing those stories was really nice. And just to see how powerful the tool could be, that people could adapt it right away and really make a difference in the classroom setting. So from the teacher perspective, that was super helpful. On the admin, for any kind of administrators out there, there was such an influx of available jobs, people moving careers, picking up and leaving, and doing all kinds of movement happening out there professionally. And that meant a lot more onboarding, a lot more training, a lot more new faces and protocols and processes that were constantly shifting and moving. And so we heard from a lot of organizations that were saying, look, now I have a repository of content that's helpful to get people to feel comfortable. They're already overwhelmed by what's going on globally, out of their control. Let's give them a little bit of control in at least their job, right? Or the thing that they need to be focused on today. And so those were some of my favorite stories of just hearing how impactful the tool was with just giving people a little bit of normalcy in otherwise pretty crazy time.
Well, and what stands out to me in the higher education context, of course, we all pivoted in March 2020, and so we finished this semester, and we all kind of made it up as we went. But August, September, new students were showing up to college as from high school, and asking, how am I going to do this? And so not only was it immediately important in March, but right, that first fall semester, you had admissions teams trying to figure out how to get people into Zoom calls and how to help people register for stuff and how to, get their first books ordered without ever seeing a student face to face. You had, student counselors trying to figure out how to get people to use the new scheduling system to take a counseling session, like all of these at every level of higher education.
Oh yeah.
In August, September 2020, people had to learn without any context what it was to begin to participate as a higher education student. And you can replicate that across contexts and audiences, but an iorad, I could imagine, I wish I had it at that moment. If I had it at that moment, it would have been a ton easier to help my scuba diving teachers and ballroom teachers and Tai Chi instructors to...
Scuba guy always comes back into the podcast.
When somebody comes to you and says, how am I supposed to teach this online? Like, oh, well, let's get some iORads built. That would have been my answer if I had the chance.
Oh, absolutely. And I think to your point, like where I see this being so helpful in the education area is the same thing. I mean, this happened and I work in online a lot, Sean. So that's a lot of what my team does is designing online courses. So this was nothing new in COVID. It was like, oh yeah, there's technology. It's here. And it's been for a while. But the amount of times it's like we're trying to support students, both instructors and even the people that I work with in support areas, that it's like, I'm here to help you figure out this thing related to your course, but I also now have to somehow figure out how to help you to get onto Zoom, because that seems to, you must have missed that memo early on when we decided to start doing it. Or the amount of times I have to be like, can you share your screen? And somebody goes, how do I do that? And I'm baffled because I'm like, it's the green button on your monitor. It's fine.
Wait a second. What day is it?
But all of that to say, like, what I love about this is it's like, okay, how can we fit into those moments and provide a way for people to learn it without having to read this whole thing beforehand or do this whole thing beforehand, but actually have something that guides them along the way. To your point, I haven't thought about this analogy until you just used it, but the kind of the GPS of training and learning in there, and I really like that concept, and I definitely think your tools achieving that in some way. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And the last piece I would say is just professional development, which was relatively new as a concept to me, not coming from the education space. But we got a lot of feedback from folks who felt that their sessions were actually much more advantageous. And I don't know, there was a lot more adoption overall from their staff, because there wasn't the distraction of, here's a 45-minute presentation. Best of luck to you. We'll see you next quarter or next year. Yeah. Right. It was much more of a self-serve. Let's get you warmed up to how to use this tool. Okay, now that you're in there, that's a distraction out of the way. Now let's talk about how we're going to deliver this. And in some of those simulated environments, they were going through the feel and the flow of a system and a process. And then when they went live, it was kind of like muscle memory. It was this sort of mind mapping that they talk about in instructional design, and it would build these pillars for people. And they would leave those sessions feeling a little more empowered because they felt like they'd tried and had application before going, back into put this in real application in live environments. So that was another huge piece that I heard. And the professional development, I know, is a big piece for educators everywhere.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It falls in line with some really important principles of universal design for learning. I don't know if you're familiar with the theory, but it actually comes out of like architecture and things primarily. And then it has become very important with instructional technology, online education, that, if I'm going to make something, I want to make it as easy for all persons to participate with it or use it or whatever, right? So we see ramps up to doors in physical society, but we also just see automatic doors. Like, it's great when you find a building that just doesn't have a door with a handle. Well, it may have the handle, right? But almost all doors just open themselves, because it is not just good for people who have a disability or a lesser ability physically, but it's easier for me. I like an automatic door. I have my entire house is smart devices. I've got a hey Google this and a hey Google that, right? I can turn that space heater on behind me by just saying 2 words. But when I use iorad, you are following those principles even in the way that the system walks the users through the steps, right? Like, it shows that visually click, and it gives the click instruction, or it gives a right click instruction versus a left click instruction. They can just click through arrow by arrow, but the thing that stands out to me the most is actually its error communication. If somebody clicks the wrong spot, there's a little kind of like a flash. There's just a little bit of a color change on screen to indicate like, oh, you missed. And it's not mean, it's not blaringly red or something, but it's this idea of forgiveness, universal design for learning principle, where I get the chance to try again until I get the correct answer. And that space to try again without like a punishment or negative feelings associated, I almost get a little emotional. Like, iorad nailed that. It's so easy for someone to do something wrong, but not feel like they can't still succeed while they're doing an iorad and trying it out.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a level of where people get very disheartened when they've made a mistake or they hit that failure point, especially a child or someone who's in their learning path, just because of their age. When they click on some areas and they're in a spreadsheet or whatever it might be, and they make some mistakes, it starts to like become a part of them. Like, oh, I screwed this up. Now I'm already down this rabbit hole. I have all these things I now need to undo in order to get back on track. And then they feel behind, and there's all these emotional components that go into that. And so, what we hear often from users and teachers is that ability to give them, as you mentioned, this sort of, kind of wall free. It's a lighter experience. There's no wrong answer. They get to try without penalty, without pressure. And then it gives them the confidence and some of that conviction to kind of move forward. And we find that that's really helpful for building the learning, the blocks of learning moving forward.
As my mom's IT person, I've just committed in my heart that going forwards, she will be receiving iorads. Like, it finally is like, I love this for work, of course, but now my life is just that much easier. Like, here you go, Mom, click this link, then text me back. Let me know.
I have an unlimited amount of these types of stories. We just bought a house, and the person that we were purchasing from, the seller, was really having trouble because everything was digital. And he wasn't that old, but he just like wasn't used to this world. And he's like the first time he'd sold a home, and the DocuSign was just very overwhelming for him, and he couldn't get it. And I felt so terrible. We couldn't be there in person. So I just whipped up a couple of IORADs and I sent them to him, and I sent it to Sandeep. I said, you realize iorad just bought us a house. Like, this was the reason that we actually signed on this property, because I sent it to him and he was able to understand. And the guy said, yeah, I clicked through your little doohickey thing. And then I got it. It was pretty easy. And I was just laughing on the back end that like it was 5 emails back and forth before I realized, like, eat your own dog food, send this guy the thing and let him do it himself.
That's amazing.
That's hilarious. I'm gonna have to keep that in mind, especially for DocuSign. I got a lot of them coming up, but yeah, that's really cool. Now I have to ask before we get to any other questions and derail us slightly, because I'm super curious, and I hope you have the answer to this. If you don't, you can just ignore me. Whose idea was it to make the iorad logo the bright pink logo? I must know. Like I
You know, it's one of those double-sided coins because it sticks out so much. Like, I've made it my background on my profile on LinkedIn, and I have many people who, because I'm pale Irish guy, like the pink in the background is not a good color on me, but you know, it sticks out in a list. So it is a very helpful color, because I think the first iteration of it, if I'm not mistaken, is that very few websites have that ridiculous color pink on them. And so when you're highlighting something, it sticks out because there's nothing to blur, nothing to kind of like blend it in with. So that was the original intention, I believe. I don't know who exactly. If I had to guess, it was probably Sandeep because that's where most of the good ideas come from. But it's funny. One of the number one questions we get asked on our demos is, okay, I love it. It's really great. I got to know though, can I customize that color? Like, can I get that thing on there? It's cool, but I've got to have some branding. And the pink, like, I can't even listen to your words because it's so distracting.
The pink is too loud. You know
so
what, though?
It's the branding element, it tends to sell itself.
It's selling features for you, right? It's driving people to want something out of it. Hats off. I don't have a hat on, but hats off.
I had one, I would do it too. Yeah, that was not criticism at all, because I agree. I think it's hilarious. Like, it's one of the first things I see, but it's like the first couple people I showed it to, it's hilarious how that's the same reaction across the board. Like, man, this is really cool. Wow, that is really pink. That really pops.
Well, once we can get back into live environments, my idea is to get a 3-piece suit in that color for conferences. I thought I could walk around with that, and that could be like the beacon that they would know I was coming before I was actually coming. Walking down like a giant highlight tool, walking through a crowd.
I 100% support this idea. So that's for all that's worth.
I hope to meet you at a conference someday, Sean.
Yeah.
I look forward to that moment.
Yeah.
All right. Looking backwards is great. I love this history. So just take a moment to kind of look forwards. Is there anything new on the horizon? Any little Easter eggs you can drop for us of what we can expect the product to, develop or change?
Yeah, one of the big projects that we have slated for 2022 here is what we call our community. It's not live yet. We're still kind of in the development stages right now. So imagine an interface, a forum, if you will, a totally public environment in which anyone, a creator or a learner, can come in and ask a question, a how-to oriented question on a piece of software. It doesn't really matter what it is, right? How do I use Google Drive better? How do I create a new spreadsheet? How do I do X, Y, or Z? It doesn't really matter. And on the back end, there's going to be a series of experts. Basically, anyone can be an expert. And what's going to happen is they're going to post a question. And in a true forum, anyone can go and answer that. And then the poster gets to basically rank or rate what they thought was the real answer to their question. Kind of like a Quora sort of environment, like you have with Google. And those are all going to be delivered in iorad formats. So the person that can create and answer the question will make an iorad. The person who asked the question will be delivered in iorad. And the entire community will be able to download that as a template or take it into their account. Not really download, more like just kind of seep it in. And we're going to do this across hundreds and hundreds of different tools, and anyone that wants to bring a new one in can do so. It's sort of democratizing how-to content for digital learning. And that's really our mission, is to get the knowledge to the people who need it out there. And we find that iorad is the best delivery mechanism for that. Instead of long-winded, YouTube videos or someone taking screenshots or text, we want something that can kind of iterate and grow and be changed quickly. And so the community is a place that anyone's going to be invited to do just that.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
You know-
I immediately think of like Reddit, except with actual helpful tutorials instead of
And less
18
politics.
billion threads of people who didn't actually know my question or my answer.
Right.
So that's really cool.
Yeah, without the memes.
Yeah.
Well, I'll find a way to
Yeah,
sneak
I could take a
meme
meme
or
somewhere
two
around
in
there.
there.
Yeah, it'll fit in there.
I'll be a community user. So the opportunity though is awesome, because if I think about my company, we have a branded learning management system, but we use normal Google, right? So I would be glad to pull your Google answers and anybody's Google answers about Slack, Gmail, Calendar, etc., and just use those. Why, there's no need to have it branded necessarily on some of these. I see the value, I guess, immediately of how I would start to integrate that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the intention. And even the best software tools on earth, they all lack proper documentation, primarily because it's so painful to make and manage. And so our idea is if they could then outsource that to crowdsourcing efforts to kind of empower their knowledge loop, that's when it's going to get really interesting, because you're going to have bigger brands who are going to be supportive of the general public helping answer questions for them. And now we're not having such, hoarding of information or these big gaps in knowledge. And that's a really important cause for us.
That really connects in our education context, though, with a movement called Open Educational Resources, OER. There's a big movement not only to create content that is OER certified, that it is open and freely accessible, but to organize it and collate it. Like, there's so much out there, but like now publisher houses are starting to get into free stuff because you got to be a part of the trend or else you lose the market, right? But at the same time, you get these silos popping up where it's like, oh, if you want these kinds of open textbooks, go over to this guy. If you want these kinds of open textbooks, go over to this person. And that stuff that can be a little bit of a pain point where the iorad community is gonna have Office 365 sitting right next to Google and their competitors, right? So that'll be, I think, a great community to see that flourish. Yeah. And I think that there'd be space for folks to even get in this from like the OER side of creating trainings, creating content that could work across, Psych 101. Every Psych 101 needs to have a section, on the history of Psych 101. So if somebody comes up with a good couple of, pieces on that, they could share that through iorad. I don't see why not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, spot on.
Yeah, I like the idea of it just all being in one ecosystem too. I think that's the component that would excite me about that idea. It's just that like being able to search all those solutions all happening through iorads instead of the 5 or 6 different versions of guides or sources that every other different group of person uses. Because just that in of itself, just encouragement, I think it is very helpful, because I think that just throws off. I see that all the time with people. Like an instructor who asks how to do these 3 things combined, and I have to send them 3 different guides from different tools that all do their guide system slightly differently. So then he gets confused because he's already confused about the tool. So that idea is I think really cool.
Yeah. And folks will be incentivized. We're going to have a tokening system for providing answers to questions and being rated or voted, in an equality way. And so that's going to be a big part of it as well, is this sort of community-driven content. Like you said, that doesn't have any sort of veil over it. There's no paywall necessarily. And it's, really there to give you the best delivery of that information, not just the content itself. Like it's good quality, but also how we learn it tends to be just as important as the information itself, right? There's a lot of brilliant professors who are not very good teachers because they have all the information, but they cannot deliver it in a consumable way.
You got it.
Have you been listening to our podcast before? Because I feel like that's a quote. No, I'm just joking. And it's true. And that's like Will and I talk about this all the time. That's why we're in the field that we're in. It's not just about the content. It's about how people learn it and the process in which they do it. And I just think it's really cool. I can tell in the DNA of iorad, like that is in what you guys are doing. So just like an encouragement to what I think that's why both him and I are so excited about this tool. It took about 5 seconds for both of us to be like, finally, like something I can use for tutorials that actually is functioning the way people should be learning tutorials, is really cool.
Love it.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much for taking the time with us this evening as we record. But for this episode, we hope that you enjoy this time with us, but also we get to share this with more folks in education because we know it can make the impact.
Yeah, guys, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate the time and talking a little bit about iorad and getting it out there to your audience. So thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Hey, folks, we'll just do a debrief, Josh and I, in just a moment. So hang on for just a second. We are back from our conversation with Sean. Really, it was just an awesome conversation. I appreciate when we get to bring in these people. I mean, we don't know most of the folks we've been, interviewing and having as guests, but it still is just so fulfilling to have them hit it out of the park. Sean not only brings his expertise in iorad, but the consideration, like Josh was mentioning as we queued things up, like he gets what it is for folks to like learn and retain information, and he sees it just like we do. How do you teach your mom? How do you help somebody down the street?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hilarious that he used his test was to use iorad with his mom to see if she could get it. That is hilarious. Yeah, I think it just shows that like some of the stuff with learning is not as complicated as people make it seem like it is. It's like this huge complex science.
Yep.
It's like, no, it's not though. Like some of it's pretty basic. We just choose to ignore it because it's more inconvenient to try to figure out how to get people to learn that way.
There are some things like procedural things that need like the 10 steps to complete the procedure, right? But if we need to learn to do something, we need to be quicker, easier, faster, more in time, more in context. And iorad fits the bill for that. I know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you and I were joking about the fact that I didn't know an instructional designer started iorad, but it makes a lot more sense now. Like knowing that he came out of learning design, like it's, I mean, when we first looked at this tool a while ago, it was one of those things where like, listen guys, we're not going to pretend that we deeply use every tool that we bring on the podcast. If you think we do,
Josh, shh, don't break their bubble. Don't burst the bubble.
If you think we do, you think way too much of us. That's way too crazy. Some of these tools we find pretty quick and we do enough tests. Now that's not to say we don't test them. Like, listen, there are tools who have not made it in the podcast. Okay. We won't say their names, but I will say, you're going to, eventually, no, you've already heard from them. Justin, who's been on our podcast, suggested a tool that did not make it on the list. We tested it and it did not achieve our desired results. So we don't put every tool on, but there are some tools that like we do some testing. We're like, okay, we could use this, and we talk about it, right? And then we try to build a better relationship with the tool. And iorad is one of those. Like we took a look at it, we're like, this is cool. Let's talk about it. It looks great. And then progressively over like 2 weeks, Will and I are texting each other about how absurd this tool is, and I want to keep using it, and it's amazing. And so
we're like head over heels.
All that is to say, I think it meets a really important need, and it's clear that there was intention behind the design, which is that how can we embed ourselves into the tasks that people need to do, make it easy for people to just record what they do, and it to show the steps. Like, how can we kind of get to that process? So I think that's really cool. And it's cool to see, like, even somebody like Sean who admits, like, he has no financial backing in the tool. Like, like this is not...
Right. I mean, it's his employer, but on the other side, like, he finds real reasons to use it in his life.
Like, he's using it in real estate. He's, like, buying a house, and he's using it to show the guy how to use DocuSign.
Here's how you do the click-through. And you know what? DocuSign is pretty good. It has its own instructions, but...
DocuSign's not that hard. I mean, but at the same time, I love... one of the words he used, the guy responded back and said, I used that doohickey you sent me, and it wasn't that hard. Like, here's the thing. It's not like anything changed about the process that the guy had to do.
Right.
It's not like the process the guy had to do got easier. It's that iorad came along, and I like his analogy, or his not analogy, but just reference of, like, reducing friction. iorad came along and reduced some of the friction that happens in learning.
Which for me
helped that.
I mean, this is like almost, I think this is a podcast idea I'm going to write down here. Like, what's the friction in your classroom? This is a reflection point when we talk about, audience analysis and trying to like maybe even make personas so you're aware of who you're teaching to. And what's the friction that's happening in your classroom? And when I remember my design classes and stuff, like that's as simple as, are your students hungry? Is the classroom warm? Blah blah. Like, but we have so much noise in our day-to-day lives, and that friction can be anywhere from not able to get the textbook to, just took 3 tests before I came to your class. Friction's everywhere.
Yeah.
But all the more when you're just looking at your own curriculum. If you, like in one of my master's degree classes, have 5 different sets of instructions for something, that's a friction point, and you need to get it down to one set of instructions and. But
because there's obviously like there's healthy friction in some areas, right, where you want there's kind of that dissonance that you want to create sometimes. But like a lot of it is like, how do we reduce that unhealthy, unnecessary friction that's getting in the way of learning? Right. Like I just feel like sometimes people are like, well, that's just a part of the situation. They should know how to deal with it, or they should, well, no, like it's going to get in the way. And so like when tools like iorad come along, they can help reduce that, right? Like that I think is really helpful. So I think that's really cool that that's kind of like their target and their philosophy. I still didn't get a solid answer to the color
why
choice, but like why, but it's fine. I'll live in mystery, I guess, at this point.
It's working. That's why enough.
I got closer. Yeah, I got closer. I got closer to the answer that will plague me for eternity.
Hey, good news for folks. If you do not know, you can brand it yourself. Like he said, it was intimate, but you can.
He
brand
dropped
it
that
yourself.
in there.
Yeah,
he's a great salesperson.
Yeah,
like let's just
nailed
be real.
it.
Yeah, he nailed it. So yeah, I don't. It's cool. I'm very I encourage you guys, if you've not checked out iorad, it's free. Like for at least up to a certain point, so you can check it out.
Yeah,
I've been using it a little bit on the free side for right now, but yeah, it's really, really cool. I am a huge fan of that tool, and I felt like I had something else to say. And to be honest, I've been trying to kill time to figure out what that was,
and it ain't coming to you.
And
that's all right.
It's not coming to me right now. It's weird. It's not great.
Well, I'll kick off our episode here, and you can think if it comes back to you. We thank you as always. We thank Sean and the iorad team for taking the time with us. It's just such a privilege to work with folks who are able to have a good conversation and share, some ideas and some opportunities to educators and others alike. This has been episode 52. Next time, we're going to be talking about reflection, right? We really think that reflection as a cognitive activity, as a learning activity, even just as a soulful and mindful experience is really important to learning. And so we want to kind of have that conversation with you, but we're also going to offer up an app called the reflection.app, that might help you and others process this in a not necessarily a guided practice, but in an intentional practice. So tune in for the episode next time. That'll get us going. As always, check us out on Twitter at High-Tech Podcast. Our website is hightechpod.us, and the email inbox is, inbox at hightechpod.us. Don't forget your picture of an emu.
Yeah.
Until next episode, as we continue to learn how to harness technology in the physical and digital classroom, we'll see ya.
See ya.